Welcome to this third video on the race car project. In this video, I'm going to be going through with you how to do your chiseling process. To start with, I'm going to be going through with you how to select the right chisel for your project and the part of your project you're going to be removing. To start with, you can see we already marked out. We've got our waist nice and clearly marked, so we know which part we're going to be chiseling, and we have cut down to our line in all the places that we need to in advance. Okay. We're going to start in this back section here. It's a nice big one. It's a nice easy one to get started on. These are a little bit more, once you've got a bit of experience, they're not so difficult, but this is a nice space to kind of start your learning on. So we know that we marked this out. That was 20 millimeters between those lines that we marked. And then we've got our range of different size chisels here, starting at 25 millimeters, then going to 19, 16, 13, and 6 millimeters. So let's first of all pick up our 19 millimeter chisel, because our brain says that should fit between the lines, okay? And it does fit between the lines, but you can see it also goes into our cuts, okay? And that's not going to be good. Anywhere where the chisel can cut into, even by accident, the part of the project that we want to keep, it's going to end badly. So we don't want one that just fits between our lines. We need one that fits between our cuts. So let's go down to the 16 millimeter chisel and have a look at that one. So that is much better. Oops, sorry, I'm just going to rearrange that a bit nicer for you. Okay, you can see how that fits nice and clearly between our lines, okay, and between our cuts. There's not a lot of room for error though, so if you weren't experienced with what you were doing, I probably would say, you know what, maybe go down to the next size. So if we put our 13 millimeter chisel on, we can see that there's actually a fair bit of extra space there, okay, on either side, but not so much that it becomes more than the space the chisel takes up, okay? So if we had a look at our 16 millimeter, we can see that. I could have that on there 3 times over, sorry, 6 millimeter, and that would then be the right width, but it's not. So there's too much space on either side. It would do the job in a pinch, but it's not going to do it well. Okay, we want to have it cutting, not tearing, and when you have a lot of extra space on the other side of your chisel, there's going to be a lot of tearing happening where the chisel's not there to cut. Okay, so this is not a great option. Now if we had a look at the top one there, that's 30 millimeters wide, so you're looking more like your 25 or your 16 for that space there. Okay, now this is going to depend on each individual person's cuts and how close you cut to your actual lines as well. Some people are going to need different sizes than others because of that. So we found out that, identified was what word I was going for, the 13 millimeter one is going to be our best option for this. So let's have a look now at how we pick the right chisel from the range of ones we had. Now, if you had a home workshop, you probably only have the one chisel, and it would be your job to maintain it and make sure it was nice, sharp, neat, tidy edge that you didn't use for anything you shouldn't. But you're in a workshop that you share with others, so you can't control how these get used or abused. So you really want to be able to tell, what am I looking for to find a good chisel? Okay, so let's start with this one here. Actually, no, before I do that, I'm going to start with some safety tips. When you are looking for a chisel and you're looking for how sharp things are, etc., you need to be very careful about where you put your fingers. For some reason, people who in an ordinary kitchen wouldn't do this to a kitchen knife would do this, yeah, would touch their finger along the top and push down hard to see if it's sharp on a chisel. Good rule of thumb is if you wouldn't do it to a kitchen knife, don't do it to a chisel, okay? So to test if there are any burrs that you can feel along the edge, you can run your finger up towards the end of the blade, but never back down and never across and never push down on it, okay? Because if it is sharp, you'll cut yourself. If it's not very sharp, you might still cut yourself, okay? And that's just silly. Okay, so the first thing we're looking for is obvious damage, okay? Now on this one here, I'm just gonna see if I can focus the camera a bit better. No, seriously struggling. I don't know if you can see that. I don't think I can get it to focus properly. But on this one here, you can see that even with the lack of focus, that the edge is not nice. It's got this massive indent here. Okay, there's another one there. And there's just a significant amount of damage to that edge. Okay. It's definitely not the worst chisel I've ever seen, but it's not far off. It's pretty bad. Okay. So you really want to avoid that. This is what happens when people hit metal things with a chisel. So if you think, oh, the best thing to lift a nail up out of the bench is going to be a chisel, you're wrong. Do not do it. Chisels are also not the right tool for opening paint cans and all sorts of other things that involve metal. The only thing this metal edge, or this chisel edge should touch is wood. Nothing else. Okay? And this is the kind of damage that you get. And this is a lot of work to remove. Okay. Apart from that, you're also looking at that beveled edge. Now, chisels that are sharpened correctly should actually have 2 beveled angles on there. Okay, and they should be different. So you can see the difference in it. Now, this one here has lots of different bevels. Okay, trying to get the light to catch on all those so you can see them all, which means this has been incorrectly ground or sharpened. Okay. Avoid a chisel that looks like this. Okay, you don't have the right angle on the edge there to get some good cutting action happening. I don't have an example for you, but if you looked at a chisel and it had a really big angle on it as well and it wasn't square to the sides, then I'd avoid that one as well. Some are set up purposely like that for a particular thing to do. That's a different type of chisel. But sometimes they're also just ground incorrectly. Okay, looking at this one here, we've got those 2 bevels, which means it's being properly sharpened and it's looking nice and neat. Okay, there's no burrs along the edge that I can feel. Okay, now there's no guarantee that it's sharp because they do dull with use. Okay, chisels do have to be regularly sharpened to stay really nice and sharp, but there's a good bet that it's in good condition and it could be sharp, and if it wasn't 100% sharp, it wouldn't take much work to sharpen it. Okay, so we've got our chisel now, we've got our block of wood, and we've got our mallet ready to go at our vise. Alrighty, so I've just moved you around a little bit so I can see a bit better from this angle what we're going to be doing and what I'm doing as I go along. Okay, so first thing I'm going to set up my work in the vise here. Now I want it to be sitting at about just below that line there in the vise and as centered in the vise as possible. Tight enough that it's held securely, but not so tight that I'm going to split my piece of wood. Okay? Alrighty, so I've got that set up in the vise, I've got my chisel, I've got my mallet. Now, the most important rule with using a chisel is that you never ever have any part of your body in front of that sharp edge. Okay? So you always chisel away from yourself, and you always have your work held down in a way that means that you don't have to have your hands around it. If I have to have my hands around it and have my chisel here, even if it's not directly in line with the blade, even if it's to the side, there's still a chance that I can hurt myself. Okay, if I have it secured by something else and I can keep all parts of my hand behind that sharp edge, I can't cut myself. Okay, as I mentioned before, sharp as knives, usually being used with a fair bit of force, okay, it will cause significant damage if it goes into your finger or any other body part. Okay, so most important rule, keep all the parts of your body behind the sharp edge of that chisel. Okay, I'm going to do this right-handed for a change. So if you're left-handed, it's just the opposite way around. Holding my chisel, I'm going to hold it in my non-dominant hand. Okay, the reason for that is I need the control on the chisel and the movement of it with my dominant hand. So that's going to be done by the mallet, because the mallet is what drives the chisel, and that's where you need the control. Okay, so holding this in my non-dominant hand, and I'm going to put that hand in front of me, palm down, thumb pointing towards my chest, fingers pointing out, okay? So like that, and then wrap the chisel around it with the chisel pointing away from me. Flat side of the chisel should be up. That's going to force the chisel up out of the wood, okay, rather than down through my wood where I can't see it at the time. Okay, so I want to have that flat side pointing up, thumb pointing towards my chest, wrap it around. It doesn't matter if you hold it further down or further up, okay, this edge is not sharp enough to cut you. So you can hold it further down there if you want to. I like to hold it quite low down so that I can rest my hand there on the vise and have a bit of extra control over what's going on and how far it can move, okay? So that is holding your chisel, okay? As I mentioned, mallet goes in the non-dominant hand and you should be standing at 90 degrees to the bench so that you are in complete control and have free movement with, I'm just going to move this much there, with the chisel, okay? You want free movement there with the chisel, and that's going to be a bit easier. That looks good. Okay, just want to make sure you guys can still see what I'm doing. Okay, and that's going to give you that control there. Now, when I first start, I want to start right at the top of my work there and have a relatively low angle with my chisel. Okay, I want to really only take this top tiny little bit there out. And then as I go down, I'm slowly going to work my way along so that the angle of my chisel changes as I work along so that I get it to the middle and no further. Okay, so holding that nice and low down, just a couple of taps. And as you can see, as I'm going along, I'm changing the angle of that chisel. Now how hard I hit that, how often, okay, and how fast I go is entirely up to me. Okay, and I am completely in control of that. And I can go as slow as I need to know that I'm doing the right thing here. Now I'm going even slower because I'm doing this right-handed and it's a little uncomfortable. Now the other thing I'm looking at as I'm doing this is I'm making sure that I'm not going below my cuts. Okay, if I am going to go below where I've cut to, it's going to end up splitting my timber. Now at any point in time, if I feel like my chisel's going the wrong way, or I'm not happy with where it is, I don't have to follow all the way through. I can start doing a cut and go, you know what, I don't like that. I don't like what's happening with that. I'm going to pull that out. Okay, so you don't have to go all the way through. At any point in time, you can stop, change the positioning of your chisel, and then go again. Okay, so I've gotten mostly down to my line on this side here, and I've got to the middle there. So now I'm going to need to do the other side, and because I can't chisel towards myself, I'm just going to turn this around in the vise. Oh, I had to pick a dodgy vise, didn't I? There we go. Same height as before. Holding it the same as before, and then just repeating the process from this side here. So starting right at the top with my chisel really low down. Now this chisel is not the sharpest one, but it's also not the bluntest, so it's doing an okay job with the finish it's leaving behind on my timber. You can usually tell the difference between cutting and tearing. And if it's a blunt chisel, it's going to be tearing your timber rather than cutting it. Okay, so now I've got this kind of hill in here. that I need to now work my way down. Now, instead of stopping right at the dead center, because that's going to be quite tricky to remove this if I do that, I can go a little bit past my center this time, but I don't want to go all the way out to the opposite edge. Going all the way out to the opposite edge is going to invite tearing out, going too far below my lines without me being able to see that, all sorts of potential issues. As I go along, my chisel can skew and go change direction, all sorts of stuff. So you don't want to ever go all the way out to another edge. Okay, you always want to come in and stop at the very most 2/3 of the way through. But to start with, about halfway, and then 2/3 is probably as far as you want to go other way. So I'm going to start at the top. You can see how my angle of my chisel is significantly different for what I want it to do. Okay, I want it to take that piece away, and I'm slowly going to work this down. Now, in between each hit, I am looking at where my chisel is. And if it's not in the right spot, I'm going to abort that hit. Okay, and reposition. Okay, again, I'm going to keep a really close eye on where I am with my cut lines, because I don't want to go below that. I'm just trying to get it nice and flat-ish on this side here. I've still got some of the hill to remove when I turn it around, but I want to get this side fairly nice and flat-ish and right down to my line and as accurate as I can before I do that. Okay. So just turning it around now, I'm just going to bring this up actually so you can have a bit of a look at what's going on. Okay, so you can see that I've taken a lot of that hill out. This side here was the side I was working on just then, and that's getting fairly flat, and I've just got to get rid of this side here now. So, same again. Starting at the top, look at the angle of that chisel. Okay, so I've removed all of the hill now, and I just want to kind of clean up that bottom bit a little bit more. Okay, so I've got rid of all of that hill and a nice flat-ish bottom so far, but there's a little bit of extra cleanup I want to do in there. Okay, so I'm going to now put my mallet down. I don't need that anymore. And because I'm not going to use the power that a mallet provides me, I'm going to turn my chisel over and use the flat side down to help me get that flat edge. And I'm just going to be pushing this with my hands. Try and get that smoothed out. Now you do need to be careful when doing this still that you don't go below your cut lines. Even though you're not likely to split your timber without using the mallet, you do need to be wary of going below your lines too much. Because if you go too much below your cut lines, you're actually going to be chiseling out too far. You also still don't want to go all the way through to the opposite side, because you'll still get that tear out happening at the opposite side, which can affect the good parts of your timber. If you do happen to go a little bit below your cut line and there's bits that are attached, you can just come down and give them a light press to cut them off. Okay. Ooh, where are we? There we go, and that's cleaned that up a little bit more. Alternatively as well, I mean, I've got a little bit more work to do, but I'm not going to bore you guys with this. So alternatively, you could also use a file to try and clean that out. But again, getting that nice and flat and keeping it nice and flat can be tricky with using tools like a file. Okay, same process for this one here. Still only going to the middle. Ooh. There we go. Sorry, I'm using a mirror to try and look at my camera. And it's not, I've got mirror issues. So, still only going to the middle when you're chiseling, still doing all the same things, starting with the same angle, slowly working up. It's just going to happen a bit faster, okay? And then same again for that one there. Now, if you do happen to chip a piece of your wood off as you're going along, you clip the bit of your chisel clips the edge of that as you're going, keep that piece. We can glue it back on. If you do split your timber a little bit, don't stress, come up and see me. We'll see what we can do. A lot of the time we can glue it and clamp it back together and get around it. So it's not necessarily the end of the world if that happens, all right? Okay, so that is the basics of using a chisel. Remember that most important rule of using a chisel is to keep all parts of your body behind that sharp edge. Never ever have any part of your body in front of it, okay? Recipe for disaster. Even a blunt chisel is sharp enough to cut through your skin. Okay, it's just not going to be as nice and neat a cut as a sharp chisel is going to give you. Okay, alrighty, any other questions? Don't forget to ask your teacher in the room as you go. Alrighty, see you in class.